9/11 Truth is not just leftists. 9/11 Truth has neoconservatives, it has, Republicans, it's got Democrats, Greens, a variety of different people.
I think it's mainly the left, though.
I don't know. There's an awful lot of libertarians running around here right now.
Probably only like one or two neocons, though, in the Truth movement.
Well,
yeah.
One of them happens to be our MC.
Paleo.
Paleo-conservative.
That's great.
But hang on just a second there. We're here to try to develop a strategy to deal with this overall corporate power structure. Well, it's not just here representing the left.
No, we're here to study, that's right, deep
politics, but also to come up with a strategy of how we can address that.
Yeah.
And 9/11 certainly is a very key issue, but it's not the only issue in terms of deep politics.
That's
there's global opium. There's a variety of things that come to play here. So we have to look who our allies are, and really our allies are 90% of the population.
It should be.
And correct, but you're rarely going to get more than 10% engaged and active, in any given social movement in some capacity until it's like storming the barricades.
Yeah, no, it's exactly the percentage I always have seen.
Yeah, 10% non-cooperation, non-violent resistance with 30 million people in this country who weren't buying corporate products or whatever we decide to do would be massive.
Yeah.
It would be, literally unstoppable. This isn't something Homeland Security is going to come and take away. But we would see repression immediately, but ultimately, with those kinds of numbers, you win. You just win. But as we cannot attack each other in that process, personally. Now, look, we got censored by Institute of Policy Studies on that. We have not named the people that did it. It wouldn't be that hard to figure out, but I'm not going to go and name the people that did that. I'm just going to say, this is what happened. We think they're wrong. They do great work. They've done a bunch of other stuff. Fine, let's just move on. And when we start to personally identify people that we don't like because they won't take this position on a certain issue, then anybody that likes them it splits us up.
Well, you've got to deconstruct a little bit what you said. It's not just an issue, 9/11. And I'm not. I grant you that 9/11 is and false flag operations is where I'm focusing. But as with so many other people I know in the 9/11 Truth movement, we are multi-valued. I've been long an environmentalist and long a humanist. And I find most of the people in the 9/11 Truth movement are. We're definitely for peace. I don't know anybody in the 9/11 Truth movement who is for war. So we're part of the peace movement.
Absolutely, and so we try to find the common ground to which we agree on. So if that's why we were suggesting international human rights is a core area. Environmental rights, and Ecuador and Bolivia have now written into their constitution the rights of nature and in the environment.
Yeah.
So I think there's some commonality, and the Bolivarian revolutions in the South are showing us this dichotomy between the power elites in the countries like Colombia and Chile, which are still very much in the sphere of U.S. influence, and those like in Caracas, Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, who's demonized here in the press, but who is very popular in Venezuela with 2/3 of the vote on every election, and building independent media. They have 400 community radio stations down there now in the barrios. It's incredible. And Ecuador, Correo and the kinds of things they're doing. They're trying to build independent media there and protect the rights for people to know. And same things happening in Bolivia and Argentina. And so as we expand and we build these kinds of networks, there's a clear dichotomy here of where the power structure is, and it's certainly within the American empire and 1,000 military bases and their global stuff and their NATO alliances to kind of control this and keep down populist movements around the world, democratic movements.
Now, if I may interject there, because if we approach this a slightly different way, I would just second every word.
But Alexander Colburn and Amy Goodman and Noam Chomsky and Matt Rothschild, all who may not be real strong on 9/11 or shy on 9/11 issues, are strong allies on dealing with the American empire.
But here's something.
Except for the.
But here is an area of discussion that you haven't referred to, and all I'm saying, really, is that it's an area of discussion that is legitimate for us to discuss. And it's not so much individual people who are on the left. They either claim to be on the left, but they have proven leftist credentials, who on particular issues are terrible barriers to a wider education. But it's also the general issue of agents of the state. Okay, now so this is simply an issue. You wouldn't have to name any particular name, and you could have a very rational and well-founded discussion about the issue of agents of the state, because they have existed from ancient times.
Of course.
The kings always had their spies, and one of the things that they do constantly is they infiltrate those who are dissenting from the given empire, and they try to redirect them and confuse them and divide them and conquer them, and that is why it's an issue. And it hasn't, in the United States, for instance, the fact that governments, the U.S. government in particular, with COINTELPRO and so on, that in the United States, for some reason, and it parallels the whole so-called Reagan Revolution, it hasn't been since the mid-'70s that legislative bodies here have looked into the crimes of the intelligence agencies in particular. It's just fallen off of the legislative agenda,
yes.
And it's so much. And meanwhile, they've grown tremendously in their power and in their sophistication.
Yes.
And so it will only be believable and normal to expect that they have agents that they infiltrate into the 9/11 Truth Movement, into peace organizations, into labor unions, and they do this all over the world.
So what?
Well, because
So what?
so you got to pay.
Do we call them out and say, "Oh, you're this and you're that"?
No. See,
we're not doing anything illegal.
No,
they're the ones that are doing something illegal.
Yeah, but
whoever perpetrated 9/11, that was illegal.
But
that was mass murder.
But I just think that
Iraq War is mass murder.
And so is the cover-up of all of these
Absolutely.
lies and ways.
Yeah.
And it seems that maybe
protection. So we have to be open and upfront, which means we will get infiltrated. There will be people looking at us. We're not doing anything illegal. We're totally transparent. We're totally upfront, and we quit trying to attack each other personally. Then you build a movement that can have some sort of togetherness and build a group of people in the millions that will be supported.
Well, now you mentioned you mentioned strategies. Don't we need strategies for dealing with agents of the state within our midst? Now, again, let me give you an example. If someone at a meeting, and I've experienced this, and I bet you lots of people have. I've experienced this lots with the Council of Canadians and in left-wing politics in Canada. You find someone at a meeting, and they're tremendously disruptive. They are more or less objectionable. They engage in name-calling and so forth. Now, and I've seen groups break up because of one or two individuals like that. Now, an individual like that, and we can discuss this generically here, we're not talking about particular names, either is emotionally immature, has some sort of problems socially, or this person, and it could be a combination too, or this person has an agenda, is potentially an agent of the state, is some kind of an undercover agent who's disrupting. Amy Goodman, as a matter of fact, wrote something for Huffington Post recently in which she had done an interview with somebody in a peace group in the Western United States, a veterans group, who was, and the person she interviewed, because they had outed an agent. It had come out in a court case. And the guy she interviewed said, I considered him a dear friend. He is such a nice guy. So, of course, they're not going to have always, the agents of the state will not always be ordered to be tempted.
If
so
we don't do anything,
if
the agent, somebody walks into your meeting and says, let's go burn down the Hummer auto plant or something like that, you can say, we don't do that. We're nonviolent.
Yep.
We don't do illegal acts.
Well, also
we're going to resist power at the levels that are legal and that we can agree with.
Well, also we can say that we can be passionate here, but we don't engage in name calling. We don't call each other liars and so on.
That's standard.
Yeah, exactly. So,
and you write a chapter called "The Shame of Noam Chomsky."
Yeah.
That's name calling.
With Noam Chomsky, I'm sorry I had to do that, because the chapter is filled with evidence. It's absolutely jam-packed with evidence of his propaganda techniques that he's used against the left. It's all there, and I tell how and
I can't understand how you can
deny
read all of Chomsky's books. You say you have 20 of his books, and you've done work with him
just
for.
16.
You said you've done work with him for a long time, and that now you can say that he's some kind of agent for the state.
Well, I will.